Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. Got a story sent to me by Steve, and it's funny because this is one of the stories that it wouldn't have popped up on my radar where I would have thought too much about it because I've seen this happen, and it happens so often that it's become one of those things that I think I may have even mentioned it in passing before. But when you see something for the first time in real life like this, you go, "Wow!" Second or third time, you go, "Oh, it makes sense." But it's one of those things that just kind of like shows us human nature. But Steve, thanks for the story. It's out of Canada too, by the way. So if it happens in Canada and it happens in the U.S., you start thinking maybe it's universal in these Western cultures. And then I realized it's actually probably something that goes back to the dawn of time. So what it is that man drives away from court minutes after judge prohibits him from driving. Yes. So the judge said, "You, sir, are not allowed to drive." He said, "I understand." He went outside, got in his car, and drove away. Now, there's a couple things going on here. And I'll give you this story first. I'll explain to you what I've seen and then some thoughts. But this is a story out of the Canadian Press and Orangeville, Ontario. Provincial police say they arrested a convicted drunk driver. So he was told for a good reason not to drive. But police say they arrested a convicted drunk driver after he allegedly drove away from court just 5 minutes. 5 minutes after a judge ordered him not to drive for a year. It's possible he thought that 5 minutes in a year, he got him confused. Investigators say an officer was in the courthouse in Orangeville, Ontario for an unrelated matter on Thursday when he watched the judge deliver the sentence to the man in question. They say that several minutes after that, the man got in his car and drove off. Police say they were able to stop the man. He's a 35-year-old man from Mississauga, Ontario. He's now been charged with operating while prohibited. In America and Michigan, we have different descriptions of this in different states. I've often seen driving while license suspended, but his vehicle is impounded for 45 days. He's to appear back in court on September 30th. And this is going to be a hard one for him to fight on this issue. And I can tell you right now that I have been in court before, waiting to have my matter called, and I'm sitting in the benches. I believe it was a court with benches. And I saw a woman get in front of the judge, and the judge said, "You are here on a charge of driving with a suspended license, driving while license suspended." And she said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "How do you plead?" She said, "I plead guilty." Now, she could have said, "I plead not guilty." She could have. But she chose not. She goes, "I'm guilty." The judge went through the whole litany of things they ask you. Are you pleading guilty because you are? Has anybody threatened you? And she hadn't even cut a deal with anybody. She had simply gone to court because she was, in fact, driving with a suspended license when she got pulled over. She apparently recognized the handwriting on the wall that said that, you ain't going to win this one. So she said, "No, I'm guilty." And the judge then says, "Okay." And he rattles off all the things that are going to happen to her. And driving a suspended license, I believe you get some points slapped on your license, but there's going to be fines and costs you pay. And then the judge sentenced her as part of her sentence. He goes, "You are not allowed to drive." She said, "Okay." And so the judge bangs his gavel. No, he doesn't really do that. The judge says, "Okay," calls the next case. She walks out of the courtroom, and I was in a courtroom, and I can think about 3 or 4 of these where it's a small courthouse, it's a district court, it's very, very small, think municipal court. It serves one small city in Oakland County. And you can sit in the benches behind the bar and look out and see the parking lot. Same level, and it's 20 feet away. It's just there's a glass window between you and the parking lot. And I've described this story before about the guy who ran away after being told he was going to have to post some money before he could get out of jail and decided he didn't want to pay it, so he tried to run away. And we all watched that drama unfold through the window. But this is not that building, but it's a similar building. And so we're all sitting there, and judge is doing another case up here. He hasn't called mine yet. And I look out and I see the woman walk out, and she gets in the car, and she gets in on the driver's side. Car fires up and pulls out and drives away. And the judge actually looked up and watched, just shook his head. Now, in that case, he just shook his head. He didn't actually send a bailiff or send a sheriff or somebody and say, "Hey, go chase her down." And we were all witnesses that she violated the court order 10 minutes maybe, because I think she went to the window first and paid. So the idea that you can tell someone to stop driving and they'll stop driving, many people, I hate to even say most nowadays, but many people would go, okay, I can't drive for 90 days. It's going to be a nightmare, but I can't drive for 90 days. There are people out there who cannot live their lives without their cars. So the judge tells them they can't drive. We all know what that means. That means they're going to go, okay, and they're going to start driving later that day or maybe tomorrow and just hope they don't get caught. As you're driving down the street, police officer can't generally look at you and go, oh, that person's suspended. They'd have to run something. Or it could be you're driving down the street and a police officer who's previously arrested you recognizes you and goes, hey, I think that person got arrested driving a suspended license. And I've heard of that happening in real life before too. And I can tell you that on YouTube, if you watch the videos of the people who get arrested and they get their windows busted out and they get in fights with the police and they film it all to show how unjust the world is to just them. You'll often see it where a police officer goes, don't I know you? Haven't I pulled you over before? Didn't a judge tell you not to drive? I mean, I've seen that exchange. So there's people out there who are chronic law enforcement officer contactors. They get in contact with law enforcement quite a bit. Myself, I like to limit my contact with law enforcement. I like to make it so it's as little as possible outside of a courthouse, because occasionally I have to deal with them as part of my job, being an attorney and all that. But there are many people out there cannot live without their cars, must have their car. And I understand this, by the way. I'm not making fun of these people. I'm pointing out that this is how our society's developed. Most people have got to get in a car and drive to their job if they've got one. Okay? Or they've got to get in their car and drive to school if they're attending school. Things of that nature. So if you have something where it is so dependent on you being able to drive an automobile, you need to actually think before you get in a situation where you lose your license and realize how valuable that license is to you and not lose it. So if you get in a situation where you got a bunch of tickets or things are unpaid or you don't know how to, call an attorney. I talk to people I've had people call me and say, Steve, I can't afford to hire you. I cannot afford to hire you. And I say, okay, what's your question? And they say, well, and they describe the problem to me. And I say, well, here's what I would do, but I'm an attorney. But you're not an attorney, but here's what you can do. And I've explained the things you can do. Most people I've encountered with suspended licenses are suspended because they haven't paid fines and costs from previous court action. And one of the things they'll do is they'll suspend you to get you to pay. And some people go, well, I can't pay, or I need to drive to get to my job to pay. But the point is that you've lost the license now. And here's how you get it back. Okay? These problems are just compounding. But you need to do what you can to get it back. There are courts out there that let you make payments. Courts take credit cards. I'm not encouraging you in all situations in life to rip out the credit cards and start charging, using the plastic to get yourself out of trouble. But in these situations, it might make sense for you to pay money that has usurious interest rates on it. I'm not actually advocating that, but something you have to pay interest on to get your license back so you can drive legally. But seeing this happen in Canada, having seen it with my own eyes, having read about it countless times, we've heard of the people who've been arrested for drunk driving 20, 30, 40 times. And some people actually need to be locked up to stop them. And if I was a judge, I'd consider that after some number of times, depending on how serious I thought the problem was. But knowing that it happens in Canada, the U.S., it's been happening all these years, I guarantee you it goes back to the olden days. I guarantee you that there was a Western court in the old Wild West court, where some guy is standing before the magistrate who's got a thing of whiskey in front of him, a couple 6-shooters sitting on the table, and he goes, son, I understand you've been arrested for driving your horse while drunk. Even though your horse does, in fact, know how to get around town, it's not safe. Therefore, I'm sentencing you. Don't ride your horse for 30 days. Guy looks at the judge, goes, oh, okay. Bangs the gavel. Guy walks up, hops on his horse, and rides off. Guaranteed. There was, and I don't know the exact location nor the time frame, because I don't want to get scientists mad at me. But a couple 100,000 years ago, there was a cave court in France, which is known for its cave dwellers from long ago. And there was a cave court. And on the bench is the club of the judge. And the bench is actually just a big rock, but it's flat. You can lay things on it. And the caveman walks in, and the cave judge looks at him and goes, "You've been sentenced for swinging your club dangerously. You've been charged with that. You've been convicted of that. You know that by a jury of your peers. You look over, and there's 12 guys wearing cloth, animal skins, giving the guy the evil eye. He's even found guilty. You've been charged and found guilty. I'm now sentencing you. You cannot swing your club for 30 sunrises. Do you understand me?" The guy grunts in affirmation because he hasn't quite evolved to that point, personal involvement. And the judge bangs his club on the rock to indicate that he is so ruled. Court is now out of session. And the defendant walked out of the cave, picked up his club. First thing he did is he whacked something with it. Plain view of the judge and his peers. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. It's human nature for some reason. And I've known people who've gotten sentenced for traffic offenses, drunk driving offenses, other light criminal offenses. I don't do the felony stuff, never have. And I've known the people who got the thing from the court that said, here's all the things you must do and here's all the things you must not do. And I knew that they were going to leave that courthouse and follow those instructions to the letter, to the jot. Guaranteed. I know that. And I also had people who I suspected, when they saw me go my way, they walked around the corner, got in their car and drove off. Even though they'd been told in front of their attorney not to do that. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for this guy. If it's true that he was prohibited from driving because he has an alcohol-related conviction, the guy shouldn't be driving, okay? And if they allow him to drive, if he survives and gets out of that suspension period, if they allow him to drive again and he stays sober while driving, I salute the man, okay? But when the judge says you can't drive and you walk out of the courthouse and you drive, it's going to get worse. And by worse, I mean exponentially worse. Because some judge somewhere is going to look at you and go, how do I stop you? How do I stop you? So in this case, they impounded his vehicle for 45 days. My suspicion is that they may have stopped him from driving for about 10 or 15. Because he's going to know somebody who will lend him a car, or he's going to go out and get another car. Or I don't know how it is in Canada if you can get a car when you have all kinds of weird stuff on your record. I don't know. But there's a good chance that even though they took his car, he can continue driving. But that's a good first step. So first you tell him you can't drive. Guy drives. Take his car and tell him he can't drive. Keeps driving. At that point, as I said, if I was the judge, at that point I'd say, you know something? It might be the only way I can stop you from driving is to lock you up. See what happens. So there you have it, Steve. Thanks for the story. Man drives away from court minutes after judge prohibits him from driving. Questions or comments, put them below. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.